Okay, hello everybody and welcome back. For this unit we do human population. So what are we trying to get done? Okay, we're going to talk about where human beings live now, in the past, how that has changed, the factors that influence population growth, how some of those factors have changed over time, others are forever, and we'll see why. We'll look at this relationship between urbanization and the concentration of people into these smaller and smaller areas of land. Population growth, economic well-being, these might seem totally separate, but they're not. And we will ultimately come to understand why population growth is a temporary phenomenon. Bear with me. Then we will look at historical views of population at some point, right? I'm reluctant to use this word evil because it's not scientific, but you have to. You'll see why, but there's no other way to talk about this except to describe how morally wrong it is whenever scientific tools are misapplied. Okay, sections. We talk about where everybody is, urbanization, population in deep time, that is going back prehistoric, the study of population, as in, like the formal, almost academic study of it as a phenomenon. Then we looked at the future, population in 2024 and beyond, the more international perspective. First thing is, where is everybody? Okay, first, the previous unit on climate change ended on kind of a difficult note, which is intentional because I don't want to make it seem like everything is going to be okay when there's these issues. For this one, we will start off with a happy note. Probably the happiest thing in the entire world. Not this picture here, right? But just look at the difference between these two. All right. So this is child mortality in 1800. In other words, what percentage of children would have died before they reached the age of 5. Historical estimates of this tend to be pretty rough, right? It's hard to get an exact figure, but something like 1/3, 30 to 40% is generally accepted. And notice, right, how much better this got, right? From 30% even in countries like the US before to less than 1%, right? This is the happiest graph in the world. Let's be real, all right? Even if you look at parts of the world which are struggling, developing countries, war-torn, right? Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia. Even the very worst, right, on Earth now is way better than it was before. So, that's good. Factors behind this, big ones. Infectious disease is a big part of why things are better now, getting infectious disease under control. Other one is nutrition and malnutrition, right? Having widely available good nutritious food for as many people as absolutely possible. Okay, for some time here, we're going to play population games. So I'm going to give you two things, could be cities, could be countries, areas, states, whatever. We're going to put a pause point. Your job is to figure out which one has more people in it. First one, we've got our ancient city of Rome at its peak. Maybe early couple hundreds of AD. Then we have city of Scottsdale, and the question is, which one of them has more people? And the answer is Rome, right? By a factor of 4. About 4 times as many people. Estimates of this one are pretty rough, but no matter how you cut it, it's a lot more than live in our city of Scottsdale, which is a city of about 250,000, which is still pretty big. Okay, next one. We have Russia, right? It's cold. People live in this part of it. Siberia, touching Alaska over here. Then we have the country of Indonesia, which is a mostly equatorial tropical island nation in Southeast Asia, which has way more people than Russia does, something like a factor of 2. And to be clear, none of these that we look at are going to be close cases. They're all going to be at least a factor of 2 apart from one another. Okay, we've got Great Britain, right? United Kingdom, Great Britain and Northern Ireland together. Famous Union Jack, all right, Britannia. And then we've got Brazil, New World, colony. Rio de Janeiro pictured here, lush jungles, and way more people, right? Something like 4 times as many people as the whole of Britain put together. Okay, so here's a state we know. This is California over on the west coast, and Sweden, right? Very well-off country, very good education systems up in Scandinavia, and way fewer people than California has, right? So 40 million in the state of California, most populous U.S. state, compared to 10 million in the entire nation of Sweden. Okay, this is Ethiopia. It's a country in East Africa, right? So this is the Arabian Peninsula here, right? This is Egypt, where my cursor is, and here's the Sahara, right? And then here's the Middle East up here, right? Ethiopia and Arizona, which I hopefully don't have to explain. Okay, which one has more people, do you think? So this one is not even anywhere remotely close, right? 120 million people in Ethiopia, 6 million in Arizona. so radically different that it's impossible to overstate, right? Arizona, what, 6 million versus California? But look at the difference in GDP between these, right? So this is total production, right? Not per capita, just gross domestic product for the state of Arizona versus the entire country of Ethiopia. So we can quickly compare, right? We've got about 4 times as much production in Arizona, right? Despite the fact that there is 5% as many people. So 5% as many people, right? It's like 1/20th in fraction form, but 5 times as much production, right? In other words, something like a 100-to-1 factor in terms of productivity. Highly unequal. Okay, Mexico, we're familiar with. Canada. Which one has more people? Mexico, right? More than a factor of 3. Far more people live in Mexico than in Canada. You might be spotting some trends so far, right? Okay, Afghanistan, country in the Middle East, recently went through a civil war, lots of civil unrest, strife, not necessarily a place that you would want to go visit. And Japan, right? East Asia, big historic value. There's Mount Fuji, right? Traditional Japanese architecture. And more people, right? By about a factor of 3. So what have been the trends so far? Well, if for all of these you picked whichever country or place is closer to the equator, you would have gotten it right every single time, right? Closer to the equator, Indonesia, right? Closer to the equator, Mediterranean, right? You pick the country that's closer to the equator and you're going to find the one with more people, with the only exception being if you are in Asia, where there are a lot of people, right? So we can look at it this way, and this is maybe not the greatest graph. It's hard to make these. Why? Because it is such an unequal thing. You'll notice, right, the little buckets or the categories for the different colors are not the same size at all. Kind of makes it look like there's more people in the Midwest than there actually is. Okay, and maybe actually understates how many people are in Asia, maybe overstates how many people are in these really densely concentrated areas in Europe, right? But we can see some real clear trends here, right? Most of the people are going to be in sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, Europe, right? And then the whole of North and South America, not so much. And there is one thing I want to point out here. Look at how, like, clean this line is, right? How severe the drop-off is. Now, we looked at this once previously. What we actually looked at, though, was this thing, this precipitation map, right? So the threshold to be able to grow crops without having to irrigate and do a whole lot of work, right, is somewhere in this range, right? 20 to 25 inches of rain a year. This is the famous 99th parallel, which historically separated the fertile prairie and eastern regions, right, where you could farm, from the arid west, where, you know, people in here make laws about it despite having never visited it in their life, right? It's the same line. Anyway, we can see another way of visualizing that same thing, right? So global population, we're looking at density here. This one makes it a little bit more obvious, right? So North and South America is highly concentrated into these coastal cities. Sub-Saharan Africa, it actually kind of overstates how many people are here in Europe, which is a problem a lot of these have because the population in Europe tends to be highly concentrated into cities. But once again, Asia is where all the people are, right? There's as many people inside this circle that I'm drawing as there are outside of it, the entire rest of the world. Okay. Notice, right? This is total annual rainfall, the amount of rain, precipitation, right? So greener areas get more, brown, yellow areas get less, right? And areas that are like gray or white get none. Look at how closely that matches up, right? So areas here, the Sahara Desert, where there's no rainfall, there's no people, right? Areas here, the U.S., where you get less rainfall, way fewer people, right? Areas here, Southeast Asia, right? You get a lot of rainfall, get a lot of people, right? Pretty much the only thing that bucks the trend here is Europe, but even then, it's pretty green. So just notice, right, to like a rough guess, right, a rough estimate, the precipitation map is basically the same as the population map, and that will come back up. One last way of looking at it, which I like, because unlike the other maps, this one doesn't make Europe or North and South America look more densely populated than they really are, right? At a first glance, you get the whole picture right away, right? People are in Asia, especially South and Southeast Asia. Africa would be second, right? Especially Sub-Saharan Africa. All of Europe put together, right? Maybe 1 billion. All of North and South America put together, right? Maybe 1 billion. And one final way of doing it, right? So if we ignored the physical size of countries as they actually are, right? And we instead had a map of the world where countries were plotted like to their population size, right? In other words, if we set the land area for these countries as being the same as the number of people, look at this, right? So North and South America, small. Europe is about the same, right? Middle East, right? Outsized compared to a traditional geographic map. Sub-Saharan Africa, outsized. And look at China and India, our most populous countries in the entire world. Look at how big Pakistan is on this compared to the normal world map. This really sends it home. Love this map. Population by world region, right? Notice, right, we've got Africa going vastly up over time. Asia, right, has been world leader in population for a long time, but is expected to decline for reasons we will talk about. North and South America, Europe, not even really players here in terms of population by these different world regions. And we'll look at why those factors are taking place as part of our next section in urbanization.